a new era for St. Louis City SC. We should have had some kind of theme music to bring us in.
Yeah, something with herald trumpets or
like it's a new day type of thing. Just the New Day theme song from WWE. We'd get copyright removed in a second if we did that.
Oh yeah, do the Muse cover of "Feeling Good" in the city vibes.
Yeah. Because the vibes are high right now, right?
Vibes are excellent.
Shockingly high for having just fired your head coach. Like that tells you a lot, right? Like the vibe.
It hurts a little, yeah.
Does it not? I mean, goodness. I feel good about it, though. I mean, Critchley said all the right things. He gave us all the right kinds of hope.
Yeah, I think at this point, what do we have to lose?
Right.
Yeah.
What more could you lose?
Well, hopefully not Saturday. But let's
one at a time, I guess, huh?
Yeah. And what better team to do it against with San Jose? I mean, they are the perennial team that we're able to pull crazy matches out from and then go on some weird streaks, kickstart a series of games, so to speak. That's probably one of my favorite things that's in my show notes is that like our history against San Jose is so far a really fun one.
Yeah, is that pretty similar to what like Santiago put in our thing? He's good at looking at like runs of games and things like that.
Exactly. Undefeated, and the two that really stand out. I mean, they really stand out. Like once I mention them, you're gonna be like, oh yeah, that's right. That was that game. Oh man, yeah. Once we do the pod, I'm really not going to talk about a lot about what I did at the presser. Aaron Leak mentions though, I appreciate that. Thank you so much. I definitely saw, like, I heard that I got some hate on the YouTube stream. I didn't check it for my own self-preservation, but apparently people thought that I was either dunked on by Diego or Diego shut me down when I asked that follow-up question. Which I do have that clip, and I will play it in the wind down when we talk more about Olof. So if you just joined us, we've got some clips from the presser that we'll talk about, and that is one of them because I listened to it about 3 different times after Aaron sent me a DM on Messenger, and I re-listened to it twice after that just to try to get a wrap around what Diego was saying. And I do think I have pieced together like what he meant by some things, both explicitly said and some things he implied. I didn't think that it was anything more than just him needing to clarify what he said because he's sort of fumbled over it as he was trying to talk through it. Because it's a complicated thing what he was talking about.
Hey guys, presser's not a competition either. So that's that's just something you should consider when you're listening to people talk in a presser.
That's true.
There are no points awarded. There is no winning. There is no losing.
I think the only time you'd lose is if you didn't ask a question.
That's fair.
I mean, if nobody asks a question in the press conference, everybody loses.
Yeah, that's absolutely true.
Yeah, I'm just lucky I get to be one of them that ask a question.
And I think you've done a stellar job, and I think most people agree. So
appreciate that.
Well, every time you have a little too much success, I think people got to hate a little bit.
Yeah. Keeps you humble, I suppose.
Well, if they have a good point. Lord knows I've been guilty.
Well, I'm ready to go when you guys are.
Okay, yeah, I'll hit record and we'll go. Thanks for putting all that info on there for me, for my brain. Welcome everyone to Flyover Footy on the big 550 KTRS. It is yet another special show, and this one is special because we have a new coach, and I think we're going to choose to celebrate that. And to celebrate that, I have my friends Stu Hultgren and Matt Baker. Stu, let's start with you, man. How are you doing? How did that presser hit you today?
I'm doing great. I've seriously got the critch, and I think Saturday is a great way to treat it. Hopefully with win.
Got the critch. Matt, is that something you're going to throw around lightly from now on?
I'm not going to use that term in the slightest. I'm just going to talk about the Critchley era is here. That's mine. And I'm owning the fact that we're turning the page from Olof ball, from Olof Melberg, and we're looking forward to our English caretaking manager now taking over. And I'm excited to see what he has to do.
Yeah, yet a new flavor of accents being added to our managerial pressers. So that's going to be very interesting. I was bringing up, boy, that Liverpool accent is nice and strong. But nothing but good things being heard about Critchley, and I think he did an absolute wonderful job introducing himself to the fans in these first two pressers that he's been a part of. So we're going to dig into that a little bit. But of course, if you're listening to us on the radio here, we are airing before the game, the kickoff against San Jose, Saturday midday, actually. And sorry, I said that wrong. You wrote it right in front of me, and I still got it wrong. Airing Friday night, so that you're ready for the Saturday midday kickoff at 1:30. But we are going to mostly focus on that with a little bit of Critchley sprinkled here and there throughout. So, Matt, let's bring it in. We've been talking about the firing and the new hiring. Why don't you give us the details?
Well, thankfully, we did a special pod covering the firing. So if you haven't listened to our last, in all caps in the Flyover feed, Olof Mellberg has been dismissed or fired, listen to that to get all the details on Olof Mellberg and what happened. We do have a few bits of the fallout to that Diego and Lutz were able to clarify that we're going to cover in our wind down on our podcast. But I thought it'd be fun to get our biggest takeaways from Olof being fired or the press conference before we get into San Jose. And so one of my biggest takeaways from the press conference that Lutz and Diego had is that they did both take responsibility, but there was also a little bit of confusion throughout. At least it seemed like it from their end on why Olof was so resistant to playing the style that they hired him to play. And that he played in Sweden. And this gets to one of the points that we're going to spend some time on in the wind down. But the big takeaway here is what are they going to be doing in their next search to ensure that this doesn't happen? And it permeated through a few questions that they were asked. And so you're looking at if the quality of the players and if the injuries prevented Olof from playing the St. Louis City style, how does that get corrected in their process? What can they do to ensure that if everything sounded good at face value from Olof and when they hired him and they could not get him to play the ball that they wanted him to play because he had a fundamental difference on what it would take to win, how do they get that corrected? And it can't be just as simple as you get the roster healthy because you can't plan for that. So there are some answers that I'll go deeper on later, but an answer could be you ensure the depth of your roster is better. It's not just improving the top level, but talking about the summer signings, talking about what to do after some of these contracts may or may not be expired or options not picked up. You raise the floor, raise the quality of your floor. So you're looking at if you have to play the caliber of player like Kyle Hebert, Josh Yarrow, Akil Watts, game in and game out. If they have to be three of your 4-man or 5-man back line, those types of players need improvement. You're 2 or 3 years, 4 years away now from your expansion season and starting MLS. It's not just time to increase the top and sign a new DP, which it also is time for that, but you have to look at the other side too. You can't just continue elevating your highest and best players that you're going to rely on. You have to make sure that you're also improving the bench players, the rotational players, the players on your supplemental roster to make sure that they can step in, even for an extended period, and take the flack off of a head coach. Make your head coach comfortable playing those guys in the style that he was hired to play, because that seems obviously not what Olof was comfortable doing.
All right, good stuff, Matt. That's Matt's biggest takeaway from what the recent news, of course. Stu, what would be the biggest thing that you're taking away from this moment in time?
This moment in time is just that, to be a little bit of a downer at the moment, it's a really, really, really tough end of the season, rest of the season for Critch from here on out. Even though we're not even halfway through the season, I went through and broke down some of our playoff scenarios earlier today, and oh boy, it is tough. Realistically, 43 points is what we're looking at. 43, 44 points is what we're looking at to make the 9th spot. And in order to reach that point from here on out, we need to go to 1.68 points per game, which I believe is equivalent to what Minnesota and San Diego are at. So we'd have to be second or third best at least team in the Western Conference just to make 9th place.
Isn't that also the pace that we were at in our inaugural season for that full season when we won the conference?
It's better. We were 1.64.
There you go.
Slightly better than what we had, which was 56 points. I think 57 is 1.68 for
So we
a
have to
full
be
season.
we have for the rest of this season, we have to be on the pace that we were at for our first inaugural season that we won the conference just to make the playoffs this year.
Just to make ninth. So yeah, it's a tall order. It's not impossible. I think we'll see how everything goes game by game. Santi has been great talking about, we'll just see. All we have to do, win 3 in a row, and that puts us in a good spot. So optimist 3 in a row sounds like a big deal when we've won 2 on the season. But let's be an optimist. It's good vibes, and we'll see how Saturday goes. Some other things. Maybe the biggest thing that stood out to me breaking things down was that we are one of 3 Western Conference teams right now that really don't have a whole lot to go for, assuming that playoffs aren't realistic. We aren't playing in the Leagues Cup. We aren't still in the US Open Cup quarterfinals. And the other teams around us are either in the playoff hunt, or they're, playing Leagues Cup, US Open Cup quarterfinals. So it's us and Kansas and FC Dallas, and Dallas is very much in the playoff race right now.
Okay.
Thanks,
good
Stu.
stuff, Stu. Appreciate that. Lots of data there, data-driven one from Stu. Very nice. My take for this moment in time is that, all eyes are on the front office. I think we've seen a whole bunch of people calling for lots of heads in these situations. And so, Olof's has been taken, I think it's fair to say. And, we lost Carnell. We're working on our 4th coach overall, interim or proper head coach. And I think a lot of people are thinking that it's been bad from the start. And I'm not saying that's not the case, but I'm really hoping it's not the case. But either way, I think with Critchley, we're going to get a really nice experimental control, because I've said this a few times if you've been listening to different outlets, but one last time, I just want to say that Critchley runs if you'd explain to me what you thought City might look like based on what Lutz has said in the last couple of years, I think the system Critchley is running at City 2 is exactly that. Just absolutely perfect. This is what we think City 2 looks like based on the information we've been given, and even based on the roster that's been built. So I think he's a great control to see, can these players compete with the system they were meant to be a part of in MLS and win? Can they get that streak that we were just talking about to make it to the playoffs? Or can they at least look functional on the field, look like a mid-table team or better based on the salary and the money spent? And if not, if we've lost Carnell, if we've lost Olof, whether those were bad hires or bad situations or accidents or what, I think they've run out of strikes. And I think if it goes bad one more time without getting at least a decent coach, or at least maintaining a decent standing in the table, or at least making the playoffs once or twice in the next couple of seasons, I think then we have to look at the front office. So pressure's on with those guys. They got to make sure this transfer window is perfect. They got to make sure that next hire is perfect. No more mess ups for them. And I think most fans could probably get behind that based on the information we've been given so far. Okay, that's it. We wanted to give you guys one take each on what is going on right now with the hiring and the firing. We're going to move on for now. We're going to think about the task at hand, and that is San Jose on Saturday. So Matt, why don't you lead us off with previewing the game from up high?
This is a fun matchup too. We were talking about this before we recorded, and the history of St. Louis San Jose is a positive one. City has won all 4 matches so far that we've played against San Jose in 2 years. It's the first time these two have met in 2025, but this is a perennial game changer of a match for City every single year. In 2023, a massively rotated City lineup that included Sam Adeniran, Josh Yarrow, Akil Watts, Miguel Perez, and AZ Jackson. Back in 2023, this is Perez and AZ, defeated San Jose 2-1 in San Jose. After a downward trend, this picked them back up over the summer. July 3rd, 2024, it was John Hackworth's first match as interim City coach. They ended their 9-game winless streak by defeating San Jose 2-0. And now we look for the third version of that. We look for the new coach bounce with David Critchley and getting back on track after 11 winless. in MLS play, 12 winless in a row against top flight competition. Thank you, Justin Horniker, for that depressing stat. And so going into this match, it is a fairly strong San Jose Earthquakes team that we're going to be playing, though they just played midweek. So we do have that little bit of advantage. If we take a step back and look at San Jose, they are 7th in the West with a 6-6-4 record, 6 wins, 6 losses, 4 draws on 22 points with 33 goals scored, 26 goals against. That's a +7 goal differential with a 3-3-1 away record. Their turnaround from 2024, where they had 11 points after 16 matches, 6 wins. San Jose's 6 wins matched their 6 total wins in 2024. I think this was a stat that Stu pulled because this was absolutely an epic turnaround for this year compared to last. San Jose was the team that was the LA Galaxy of this year last season. So they've had a pretty massive turnaround with head coach Bruce Arena. Their last 3 matches, a 1-0 win against the LA Galaxy this past midweek, a 3-3 draw at home against Houston Dynamo, a 0-0 draw away to New England, a 3-3 draw at home against Miami, and then 2 wins before that. So we're talking lots of goals scored. We're talking a pretty good defense, and we're talking massive differences back and forth. 3 goals, 0 goals, 1 goals. This team's all over the place. Some trends we've seen from San Jose, they've only been held scoreless twice this year. This is a team that loves to score goals. 6 matches where they've scored 3 goals or more. They are currently riding an 8-game unbeaten streak, and they haven't lost since April 26th at the Columbus Crew. That game marked the end of a 3-game losing streak. So this team, not only lately have they been up and down in goals scored, but they've been a very hot and cold streaky team this year as far as a series of wins, a series of losses, and now this series of unbeaten streak. In fact, they've only had streaks this year. Never had a win-loss-win or a loss-win-loss back-to-back-to-back. So maybe this does bode well for us if they're coming off of a win. They have been a hugely successful scoring team. They lead Major League Soccer with 33 goals scored, with the Philadelphia Union being right behind them at 32. But they've also allowed and conceded a lot of goals. Tied for 9th in most goals conceded in all of MLS. They've got some injuries going on. Notably, Chicho Arango, their leading goal scorer, Golden Boot contender, is expected to miss this match after sustaining a hamstring injury against Inter Miami a few weeks ago. He has 4 goals in 2 matches against St. Louis, and we might not have to face him. The goals against were with RSL, but Chicho Arango has been in Chicho Arango form, and to not have to play him is a blessing for St. Louis. Additionally, they're likely to miss their goalkeeper Daniel with another lower body injury. He subbed off against New England a couple weeks ago, and he's expected to miss this match. And the other significant injury for San Jose is Noel Buck has a possible MCL injury, and he's expected to be out for the foreseeable future. They got a couple other names that are going to show up on their player availability list, but those are the 3 big ones to follow. And for me, San Jose's storyline are they played midweek against LA Galaxy, that late 9:30 match Central Time, and they'll be coming into this on 3 days rest with as few hours in between matches as possible in MLS. 9:30 p.m. Central kick on Wednesday, 1:30 p.m. Central kick on Saturday. 3 of their clean sheets came in the last 3 matches. That includes a U.S. Open Cup 1-0 win. So they're not really dependent upon Daniel for a strong defense. With him having gone out against New England, they've had some clean sheets in the most recent games. So you're looking at Earl Edwards Jr., a 33-year-old American who's doing just fine in between the pipes for the San Jose Earthquake. And their attacking threat without Chicho Arango, it's dipped a bit, but they still have an overall high threat. And we'll talk about some of those players in a little bit who include Jose Martinez, who you may know from Atlanta United, CF Montreal fame. In 3 matches without Chicho Arango, they're averaging 1.8 XG. In 13 games with him, they average 2.17. So they still generate a good amount of chances. They're still going to generate shots, an average of 13 shots per game in those 3 recent matches, while on the season they average 15.5. So this team doesn't change a whole lot without Chicho. They're just a little bit less effective. Phil, do you want me to go into St. Louis?
Well, let me first say that you are listening to Flyover Footy on the big 550 KTRS. Wonderful timing there, Matt, as we go on to talk a little bit more about St. Louis. Am I right about that?
I am a company man. Let's do it. St. Louis, obviously 14th in the West with a 2-8-5 record. We know 11 points, 11 goals scored, 20 goals against, -9 goal differential. This is the wake of the Olof Mellberg era. I mean, this is the what he leaves behind: an 11-match winless streak in MLS play, that 12 of the last 13 I mentioned. The most recent matches: lost to Colorado, back-to-back losses against Minnesota, a draw against SKC that felt like a loss, and a loss against San Diego rather. We turn the page on all of this because the Olof Mellberg tenure ends with not having won a league match since Seattle on March 15th. We put all of these trends aside for the moment, because we've talked about them, we've gone over them over and over, and we're ready to turn the page. What we turn the page to, thankfully, is a healthier team. We look at the possibility this weekend of having 2 or 3 players show up on the player availability report. Those 2 or 3 players are probably going to be Giannis Horn, Joakim Nilsson, and potentially Kyle Hebert. As of Thursday at training, Giannis Horn was absent from training, Joakim Nilsson was absent from training, and Kyle Hebert was said to be training indoors only on Thursday. Everybody else, team participation and in full from what we saw. Thomas Totland trained in full all week. Rasmus Alm trained in full all week. He played with City 2 last week in a sub appearance. Henry Kessler trained in full all week. Those players have had a few days to prepare, as Coach Critchley said on Thursday, and he's hoping they can all contribute. Alfredo Morales training in full all week. Edu Leuven trained in full all week after having gone 94 David Critchley's City 2 team last week. Critchley said on Edu Leuven, quote, "He's been at training this week. He's looked sharp, focused. We anticipate him being involved. Would love to have him in the squad." And guys, to me, all that means is if the personal things are shaking out in the positive, he's going to play. This is not an injury concern for Leuven. As far as availability goes, this is he able to be there present with his family stuff going on? That's all we have to worry about for Edu Leuven. The biggest storylines for St. Louis are obvious. Is it new coach bump time as David Critchley takes over from City 2? And how will the players respond to this new manager and his new assistant? We hear positive things about the meetings that they've had. Critch talked about how the players are kind of bought in on the formation that he's wanting to run, the style he's wanting to implement or re-implement, as for a lot of them are concerned. The attack, the defense, we expect it to look different. And guys, honestly, as far as the manager goes, I put in a quote from Tim Parker on episode 4 of MLS's Onside documentary, which is probably one of the saddest episodes humanly possible to watch. And he said, quote, "When you're losing, the team's more likely to make changes than they are extensions." So this to me applies not just to the coaching situation, but it applies to the fact that so many players have contracts that are ending after this season. This isn't just David Critchley potentially trying out for a position. This isn't just needing to win for the playoffs. These are players fighting for their St. Louis City careers in a lot of ways, where the front office might want to pick up their options now, but the players are playing so that they want to pick up those options. And that's probably one of the biggest storylines we can follow besides the concept of a new coach bump.
Lutz had some very dark comments on that in one of those pressers. So that's well said there. But all those players coming back, absolute music to my ears. And Stu, I know you like to talk about the new coach bump from time to time. So take your pick of anything you'd like to say about City as we stand right now.
Oh, man, I think the statistics are out there that the new coach bump isn't that much of a factor, actually. But I think case-by-case basis with clubs, and I think moving on from Olof in this situation, I think will give us a bump, even if Critchley brings in positive vibes. Just thinking about how Hack came in last year, and the change that was made, even if it wasn't, the best tactical changes necessarily, there was definitely a lift to the team, and I think Critchley will bring that from a bump side. How sustainable that is, I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah, I mean, hoping for the best, right? Matt, let's move on. We're making really good time tonight, and I think we should just keep pushing our luck here. Tales of the tape, right? Let's get a little bit more in depth here.
Yeah, let's look at a little bit on San Jose. They run a 3-5-2, and our old friend Stu and Phil, Daniel Muni, is their central center back, a St. Louis FC U18, U19 alumni. I'm sure Stu could tell us a lot more about him, but I'm not going to let him yet because I'm going to say that San Jose averages a 48.3% possession, which is 10th fewest in Major League Soccer and 8 spots higher than City's 43.8% possession. So it's going to be fascinating, and I'll talk about these in a minute as far as my questions, to see how City's average amount of possession changes under David Critchley. There's a key stat here on City 2 that I'll get to in a minute, but on San Jose's kind of hit that sweet spot in their scoring this year. They lead MLS in goals scored while having a goals minus XG right at minus 0.6, meaning that they are finishing almost exactly what they should be, and they're generating the most goals. So this isn't a team like St. Louis who's generating a low amount of XG, but finishing even lower amount of them. It's not a team that is overperforming their XG. And so their XG is middling, but they're just scoring buckets of goals and you could call them lucky. No, this is a team that the statistics say should be scoring as many goals as they are because they're generating that many good opportunities and they are finishing those opportunities. In fact, they lead Major League Soccer in overall shots and shots per game. They're tied for 4th in goals per shot. So this is a prolific offense here. In running a 3-5-2, they play a lot down the wings. They play a lot of long balls. They like to play the offside trap, so they'll try to get in behind the defense. And that's going to be an interesting story to watch with our 4-man back line. Spoiler alert, that we're going to see this weekend. But they are missing Chicho Arango. The former Real Salt Lake striker has 9 goals and 2 assists. He's going to miss. That's 9 goals that they don't have available. Jose Martinez, like I mentioned, he's another striker with 6 goals and an assist on the year. Christian Espinoza, 4 goals and 8 assists. Him and Hernan Lopez will probably both play underneath the 2 strikers, depending on how they look without Chicho Arango. So there's a lot of firepower that this San Jose team have. They love to attack down the wings. They're, like I said, really strong in finishing their scoring opportunities. They're great on attacking set pieces. They are good at forcing turnovers, stealing the ball from the opposition, and they're strong in aerial duels. I think we're gonna see a battle on the field with Klaus as far as who wins these aerial duels, and that's where I hope Henry Kessler's back. Kessler and Baumgartel on that back line with their height would really help out in winning some of these aerial duels.
What a cool combo that'll be too. I'm sure we'll get into that as we move on. Stu, anything you're worried about with San Jose, or anything you'd like to see St. Louis do against San Jose?
Well, Bruce Arena, I think undoubtedly he's the, if you want to talk about greatest of all time, American coaches, soccer coaches, Arena's on the very short list of maybe 2 that you talk about. So anytime Arena's around, a team's going to be well managed. They're going to be well set up, well prepared. Matt talked about the turnaround that they've had since last year. They had 6 total wins last year, the whole season. They've already matched that this year. So they are flying. They're, unbeaten in 8 straight. Matt alluded to it. Daniel Mooney, he's a great kid. Excited to see him succeed in San Jose. Max Floriani got drafted from SLU. He was a SLU center back. Right. And he's also been starting for them, I believe, due to injury, but he's been doing well. So we'll see those local connections. Always love seeing those guys succeed, not against City, but I'm sure you'll see some Mooney or SLU kits, or even some IU players that Dan Mooney played with, who will be walking around the stadium. So give him a wave and some cheerful banter, and hopefully Dan has a rough night.
Yeah, just this game though. Good stuff. I enjoy hearing about that. I'd totally forgotten about Floriani, so that's super cool to hear that he's thriving there as well. No surprise, honestly, for me. You're listening to Flyover Footy on the big 550 KTRS, and it's Friday night. We're getting you prepared for that 1:30 game tomorrow against San Jose as they come to St. Louis under new coach, interim coach David Critchley, and I'm excited to see it. I think our attendance is going to be pretty good tomorrow. I think all of St. Louis is going to be interested for that, and interested to see some better, more functional soccer, more exciting soccer at the very least coming up. So Matt, we have some questions to talk about. I imagine that improvement is what you're looking for as well.
Oh, this is my favorite part of the show. Outside of our wind down, where we're just going to chill and talk about the presser and more Critchley stuff, I love this part. So the interesting thing about City going into this, like I said, isn't what they've been doing, because we know what they've been doing. They're extremely low possession. Their average height of engagements has been abysmal in the press. Few entries into the final third, even fewer passes within the final third. The most important thing is, what will David Critchley implement that's different from what we've seen with St. Louis City? Or what will he be able to implement differently with just a few trainings under his belt as head coach? Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday being those trainings. So we've got some videos here that I want to play, and then we'll come back right after they get done to discuss what Critchley has to say, as he said on Thursday in the press conference.
I think the best way we can do that is entertain them. And entertain them with the ball, for me, means a lot of control of the game, but also a balance of very, very quick attacks. without the ball. I think we've all seen good success at this club when we press the opponent, when we're very aggressive against the ball. So we might play out of a different shape. The concept might be different, but the philosophy and the style of play remains the same. We're going to be aggressive without the ball. We're going into this game on Saturday.
First of all, how great is his accent? Absolutely.
Massive relief.
I mean, it sounds like soccer should be said. Like I get joy out of listening to podcasts and listening to announcers when they have the English accents. It's just it tickles the brain in a fun way. I don't know what it is about that, but there's a lot of substance behind what Critch had to say too. Aggressive without the ball, lines pushed high. He comments fans on the edge of their seats. He wants to play that exciting soccer, and he's willing to play that exciting soccer. We're going to talk later about why Olof wasn't willing to play that exciting soccer. Critchley has a proven track record from the U16 level, the U17 level, and City 2, all in our organization in playing that exciting style of soccer. And he hasn't let injuries hamper that. He hasn't let different unavailabilities. He's worked with who he's had, and he's made that style work. And that's one of the reasons that he's gotten this job. Talking about we don't want to lose the ball on the field where we feel vulnerable. And when we lose, we want to have players near to counterpress. These are things that are going to be, I feel, the hallmark of Critchley's time with City. And the players returning to health, yeah, that's going to help a whole lot. But I think Critchley was brought in specifically for his experience in this system, this style of play. The one knock I've seen on Critchley is the lack of this level of experience with this age of players. And I think that speaks to what City's priority is in making him this caretaker manager. They need to get back to the basics, essentially, of what makes this organization St. Louis City style soccer. And so that's what Critchley has a proven track record of doing. And that's why he's kind of earned this position. But aside from that, another really fascinating story to me is going to be who actually starts this weekend, who sees playing time, and how is it going to be different? Is it going to be different than what we've seen in the past? And I want to get your guys' take on this because a new manager coming in, may have certain takes, certain feelings, but with such little time, would you really be that surprised if he just went with who had been starting and tried to tweak a few things in the pace of play? But here's what David Critchley said on how he decides on which players may be seeing time this weekend.
It's given every player a chance, given every player an opportunity to feel like they can earn a starting spot on the weekend. And I've been around it obviously now for 4 years at the club, but I've kept a close eye on the first team since I've been in City 2. So I've been working close with the first team staff. I watch all the training sessions. Obviously, a lot of the guys have come into the City 2 environment as well at some point. So I've been paying very close attention to the first team now for several weeks and months. So I think I'm very prepared, obviously, to look at the players objectively and choose a lineup that.
The other theme that I'm catching from Critchley is a consistency about wanting to get 3 points. I think he answered maybe 5 or 6 of his questions today with to get 3 points. Like that's what it all comes back to for Critch. But knowing that he's talking about objectivity in his assessment of players, not just who's played the most at City or who's even seen time with City too. So not relying on just like a Leuven or an Alm or a Baumgartel or some of those other players, JGR, who've seen time with City too. Jay Reed, even toss him in there. But objectively, using the data, having watched City closely here over the past few games, what do you guys think does this bode well for players who we may want to see on the field, like a Jay Reed, maybe like Rasmus Alm if he's fit? Or do you think that this is, now I don't want to say smoke and mirrors, but kind of we may see a Yarrow, a Hebert, a Watts, and a Baumgartel again?
What do you think, Stu?
I don't, and I think Aaron talked about this in the chat. I don't know if we're allowed to play without Hebert at this point.
Yeah.
Will Energizer Park just, sink into the caverns below it and swallow us all up if Hebert's not in the starting 11? I think there is maybe some gamesmanship, but Critch was pretty open about 4 at the back, which if he wanted to be coy there, he could have been. I think he'll play what he thinks is the best available. My gut says we probably won't see Watts and Yarrow, but I think we'll get to the lineups later. But I think this is going to be the most difficult lineup to predict this whole season.
Well, let me play the last clip we have of Critchley real quick because it speaks exactly to Stu's point.
Does that also involve a 4-man back line?
Yes. I think it's one of the core concepts of this club, and again, we want to be. If you've seen any of the City 2 games this year, we've played out of a back four system. It's something that I think a lot of these players are comfortable with. I had discussions with the players if they're comfortable in these shapes as well. Obviously, when we talk about the philosophy of the club and the style of the club, we've always operated in a back four system. I think it's something that has a massive amount of benefits to it.
Phil, I got to get your take on this one because I didn't realize that this could be interpreted as shade against Olof. A four-man backline is a core concept of this club.
I actually didn't care for that comment, but not because I didn't think it was shade against Olof.
Okay.
Again, I said it in the pre-show that, pressers are not a competition. Like, we're not trying to keep points and shut people down based on what is said or not said. But, I think it should always be open to interpretation for the coach to put whatever formation they want out there, as long as it gets the job done in the way that, the roster is built, right? The things that we care about. We want to see exciting soccer. We want to see pressing. We want to see some goals, ideally. So, if he thinks it's vital to his system, his version of what that looks like with City, I think he's proven himself enough to say something like that, and he would know perhaps better than you and I. But I think it's open to interpretation. But I don't know. What do you think, Matt?
Yeah, I agree. I don't think it had any shade context. I saw that on social media, and it never dawned on me at all that would be like a shade. I think it was just telling it like it is for what he sees the City organization, and that kind of speaks to his alignment with the front office in what they expect him to do and what he's been doing this entire time. And I think the stats from City 2 back up not just the four-man back line, but the overall style of play that he wants to implement and how they're looking to translate this. And so if you're looking at really what to expect from the City side, ideally under David Critchley, what is he going to instruct the players to do? How is he going to tell them to play? City 2 is successful this year, and they're perennially successful, but under Critchley specifically. Critchley was hired in November of 24 to be the City 2 coach. So this season has been his. They're third in Next Pro West, in the West in Next Pro with a 6-4-1 record. They've got 20 goals scored in 11 games, which if you're good at math, that's better than City's 11 goals in 15 games. They're averaging 56.3% possession, good for third most in Next Pro, and they've tied for first in clean sheets with 4 in those 11 games. They lead Next Pro in accurate long balls per match. They lead Next Pro in tackles per match. So they're aggressive in all the right phases of the press. They're accurate, making good decisions on their long balls. And these are players who have been coached throughout City, the City organization, the academy players, those brought in early in training camp. So they're all playing under the same ideal mantra that John Hackworth has been leading as the previous director of coaching, technical director. And I think this should be a seamless transition as much as any can be at this point. Knowing that a lot of these players played under John Hackworth, who himself has the same philosophies as Critchley in the City organization. The exceptions obviously being Baumgartel and Wallem, but I don't think they're going to have issues catching on to this. I think everybody else, in an ideal scenario, they're going to fall right back into the success overall that they were having at the end of last season. But with that extra quality, with Wallem and Baumgartel can offer, they'll be just a little bit at a higher level than they were. And there's obviously the intangibles. We've heard I showed in our live chat, we heard the rumblings of players being frustrated, or people in the organization being frustrated, not just the front office with how Olof was implementing his style or the system that he was running, but getting the most out of some of the players, like the obvious thing with Indiana Vassilev being sent out earlier this season with rumors of him being asked to play a position he didn't really want to play, or being, not an ideal candidate for Olof to implement, where Vassilev wanted to play in the attack. A lot of things just didn't seem to align in these 15 games. And so you're looking for Critchley to take the success he's had from City 2 in this organization and kind of reapply it to the players that were having success like this at the end of last year.
Stu, what do you think success looks like in the next several weeks? I know playoffs is one measurable you've seen there. If we don't make the playoffs, what are other things you'd like to see in the next several weeks?
I think it's like kind of a game by game metric that we're looking at. So we don't know Critchley might be here for only a few weeks through the start of the window. He might get replaced at another time. He might last through the end of the season. So I think success is match to match, and it starts with San Jose. But for the end of the season, I would be happy with seeing positive momentum at that point, even if it isn't in ninth place and making the playoffs. If we are flying into the end of the season and everyone and the fans are all excited about 2026, I think that would make the second half of the season a success.
And Matt, kind of same question for you. I think I'd like to hear specifics on what is success on Saturday, tomorrow, if you're listening on the radio. But maybe also just like a couple things you'd love to see this season by the end of the season.
Well, success is, I'll follow up Critchley. Success is a win, 3 points. There's nothing less. I mean, that's as specific as I think you need to get on one level. But if you're going inside the game, I need to see better quality. I need to see more drive and determination from the players. I need to see better off the ball movement. I need to see more dynamic play by the players. One of my biggest concerns and frustrations so far this season have been the poor off the ball play by all of our city players. You're getting our defensive midfielders who come in and they ask for passes and they're just standing in between two attackers from the opposing team. There's no creativity in the movement to try and generate a dynamic movement of the ball up the field. And that's a reason that we've failed in progressing the ball out of the back. And if we're going to progress the ball with anything outside of a long ball, then we need better movement off the ball. We need players helping each other. We need passes that lead players and not just passes where players are coming back and they receive the ball at their feet, but they're not only facing the wrong way, but they're moving in the wrong direction too. They're moving backwards towards their own goal as they receive it with their back towards the attacking goal. We need to have better focus. We need to have better positioning in these areas. Use the half spaces. So turn and go as you accept a pass, or lead a player if you're the one sending the pass. These are all things that these players have done before in their careers. They did it for City last year in a lot of ways. But to quote Lutz, do you think these guys forgot how to play? No, I don't. I just think they've been put in really bad positions on the field with poor instruction to unlock their full potential and what we had been seeing previously. And so I'm looking for Critchley to help with that. Give them their confidence back at the very least. I think that probably goes into this a lot, because if these players have the confidence, then they can consistently do, for instance, the play on the ball that Cedric Teuscher did, I believe, against Minnesota. The one time I think all season where I've seen a single player receive a ball and then beat two defenders playing on the ball to progress the ball up the field 10, 20 yards and then make a pass that ends up scoring a goal. I think one time all season that's happened. And that kind of dynamic movement, the kind of trusting yourself as a player to play in the right spaces is what I hope to see Critchley provide the players. I'm not looking for a massive change in tactics in this game just because it's 3 games. I think the players, their focus is shifting. They hopefully understand what Critchley's trying to do, but I still worry about not only which players may be available, but as time goes on, continuing throughout the season, we're going to see that improve more and more. I think this needs to be just a good start to all that.
Yeah, and that's kind of exactly what I was thinking, is that this is going to be a little bit like a national team game, right? We've gotten about a week of training, and they're going to have to go out there and remember, the natural instincts that they have as professional soccer players, the things that made them special in the first place, right? Because every one of these guys is special to some degree, even the backups and things. These guys are meant to be here. They didn't get here on accident. So just like Lutz said, these guys didn't forget how to be good overnight. So, just set them up. That's why it's such a relief to hear Critchley say the very typical St. Louis City things, right? These guys can play this system. They can remember how to play soccer. They can go out there and ball, even if it's like street ball for a while. It's gonna be simple probably, but hopefully look better, look functional, unlock some guys because they're set up to succeed. So that's all I'm hoping for tomorrow. And then long term, let's get some kids in there, right? Especially if the playoffs are out of the story, let's develop some kids and get them more ready for the following season.
And Lutz had a lot of comments about needing to play the kids. We'll talk about it in the wind down as well. So there's
good stuff. All right. Well, you're listening to Flyover Footy on the big 550 KTRS. We're going to get you ready for tomorrow by giving you our projected lineups. And even if we get these wrong, we often give you little hints and secrets to why we think it might be the way it is. And it also will give you some hints and secrets, perhaps, to what it actually ends up being as well. So, Matt, let's start with you as always. Give us a baseline for tomorrow.
I'm going to go full positivity and full optimism on this one as far as health and availability goes. As much as I mentioned earlier, I'm not including Horn, I'm not including Nielsen, and I'm actually not including Hebert, the three players who weren't out. They weren't out on the field on Thursday, so I'm just not going to include them. And so I am going to go with Hebert's first time sitting, and then the jokes will obviously begin about Hebert was an Olof guy exclusively. But no, Roman Berkey and net. I've got my back line starting from left to right. A four-man back line. It's a 4-2-3-1 in my formation. I've got Jay Reed, Henry Kessler, Timo Baumgartel, and Thomas Totland. Jay Reed obviously left back instead of Horn. My midfield is Eddie Leuven and Chris Durkin. My attacking trio is actually Marcel Hartl, Cedric Toyshirt, Conrad Wallem, and then my striker is Klaus. Now, I went back and forth, literally deleting this back and forth twice because I've got Celio and Jean de Silva on my bench to start. And I honestly, 50-50, I argued a little bit during this week of maybe Toyshirt should sit to get his mind right a little bit. But I don't know the impact Critchley is having coming in here because Toyshirt has missed a couple of really easy shots here recently. So that's an easy thing I could see Celio or Silva pop in there. But fitness is also the other biggest question. If Totland and Kessler aren't good to go, then you're possibly looking at plugging in Hebert if he can, Yarrow as a third option. And then at that right back, it's possibly Watts. Or you could see Wallem slide back to a right back and then put in Celio or Silva at the top. A few different things depending on what the availability looks like. And if you really think that Kessler and Totland are going to be good to go to start this game.
What do you think, Stu?
Oh, yeah, this one's tough. Just with question marks of a lot of people are going back into the lineup, are getting healthy. How many of them are fully match fit to go, 70 minutes, 90 minutes? Man. I have Berkey, of course. I had Horn, but Reed if Horn's not available. But with Reed, I'm still uncertain, but I'm not sure who exactly put there instead. Do we slide Wallem over to the left back role? Baumgartel, I actually have Hebert. I just feel like that man is going to show up, and he's going to play whatever it takes. He's going to be out there and he's going to play. And if not Hebert, I'm going to maybe annoy some people the next couple. I think we see Yarrow and Watts at right back, Leuven, Durkin, Hartl, Toykert, Wallem, and Klaus. So I'm also going 4-2-3-1 on that.
Okay. Yeah, I agree. I think it's going to be the 4-2-3-1. And I do think Matt's lineup is probably the good one, the baseline. And just like the only thing I'm wondering is Toyshirt in the middle as the 10, Hartl out left with freedom. How are we going to play with that? I think that makes the most sense because I think Toyshirt will look a little bit more like, a slightly removed striker playing at the 10 position. And Hartl's going to float no matter where he is on the field in the starting lineup. So who cares there really? But I do think those are fun things to kind of play with in my mind. I will go differently just because I think that left back situation, I would prefer to see Wallem up high. But I think with Horn not available and just with the people available, rather than slipping Reed in, I think I'd rather move Wallem back to left back and have Celio play in this game. So I put Berkey, Wallem at left back, Kessler, and Baumgartel. I'm saying Totland because that's what I want in my mind. I cannot wait to see Totland. I think it'll be Watts, but I'm going to say Totland, Leuven and Durkin. And then this would put Celio left wing, Hartl as the 10. Toyshirt would be pushed to the right wing, which I'm a little bit weird about, but I'm fine with it. He's done well there in the past, and he figures out how to play his way over there sometimes. And if he has a right back that can come up and play wide, he'll be fine there. And then Klaus up top. So that's my thoughts. Let's do our score predictions. Matt, lead us off with the Vegas betting odds.
Yeah, they like the new coach bump. Plus 105 to St. Louis, plus 220 to San Jose, and a plus 300 for a draw. So it seems like a home team with new coach bump is fairly favored in this one. And I like it as well. I think I'm going big. St. Louis with a 3-1 win. I think this is, I'm as optimistic as can humanly be possible after an 11-match winless streak. I'll just say that.
Yes. Stu, what's your prediction?
I'm going to be an optimist here as well. And I'm going to say 2-1 City. I think we'll break the 8 games undefeated that San Jose has coming into this.
And I will say 3-2 to be different. Let's see 4-back system, the back line. It's their first time perhaps together. Defending once we got the attack going with Hackworth last season when this happened, the defense struggled a little bit. So I'll give that a 3-2, and we'll see how it goes. Thank you so much for listening to us. We're Flyover Footy on the big 550 KTRS. I hope you feel prepared for that game tomorrow. Hope everyone got their tickets. I have a feeling it'll be a sellout again with the excitement over the new team lineup and the new look. So hope to see you guys there. Thank you for listening again. We'll talk to you later. Okay, we're out. Booze, you sticking with us, Stu?
I'll stick around for a couple of minutes, but I gotta hit the hay shortly.
right.
Steven, yes, I am almost lifelike here, but not quite.
Facebook chat is wild tonight. Okay, if you're new to Flyover Footy, we'll be right back. We get our drinks and we dive into the wind down. We'll have plenty on the press conference, plenty of speculation, plenty on Olof, Lutz, Diego, and more in just a minute. Yeah, Aaron, if you wanted better odds, you might need to pull the trigger before Olof was let go. To be honest, things were looking dark there. No moonshine tonight. No, God help me. Good Lord, that would be awful. I don't think I've gotten that bad. I mean, I've gotten pretty down on the season and was really, really craving a change with some kind of leadership, whether it was Olof or his assistant Vali, but I hadn't gotten to the point where we're drinking moonshine.
Yeah, hopefully not. And no one can see it, but I'm not drinking moonshine, but I am drinking out of a Bell jug. So it looks like it could be, some moonshine. Oh man, 24,999 other candidates.
Man, you guys are going to blow up my show notes with questions like that, Abo. I'm over here planning on playing clips from Lutz and Diego and going into the presser, and you're over here asking questions like, how do you interpret Lutz's youth comment? Because I have a different opinion on that, but I think we'll try to save it and get it to it in the show.
I missed that comment, or I didn't take it the same way either as Abo. You guys ready? Let's just do it.
Hang on one second.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Oh, here we go. Welcome, everyone, to the wind down.
The Critchley era begins in earnest with our first wind down under his stewardship.
Well, Stu, since you are saying I'm going to bail in a few, I prefer to start with you when we know that's coming. So, yeah. What are your thoughts, man? This is the wind down. This is the time to air out grievances or say the things that, maybe aren't proper for the radio.
Oh man, no, I've trained myself not to curse in front of a mic for a while, so I don't want to break that habit.
Good man.
Could go badly. I think there are probably some early episodes out there somewhere that we are talking a little bit less civilly in Phil's living room or something like that. But no, man, what a wild few days. Everyone getting the messages, the notifications that the change happened at 7 p.m. Like, what the heck is going on there? So yeah, what a week that has shifted from everyone just being down in the dumps despairing to, like Matt said at the opening of the episode, man, vibes are great. We are actually excited after we, fired our coach. It's kind of wild, but long may we be happy.
Cautiously happy.
Cheers to that.
No, just full on
Nice.
reckless happiness, reckless optimism, as Blues fans would say.
Yeah. It
I
does
can
feel
get on
reckless.
board with that.
Yeah. I would say everyone is happy though. I think I mean to a person, not a single person is kind of being down right now about this situation.
You know, it's there's other things to be excited about this week. We don't want to spend too much time going over them, but I have to really get these plugs in. Is we had 2 players make U.S. national teams this week, get call-ups. We had midfielder Tyson Pierce called up to the U.S. U18 youth national team for the UEFA Friendship Tournament, which he'll take part in that in Nyon, Switzerland from May 28th to June 11th. So Tyson is actually in Switzerland right now. City 2 midfielder / right back made the team, and he's a perennial youth national team player. And then right after that announcement, Mekhi Joyner was announced as called up to the U.S. U19 men's youth national team camp, where he'll be with the team in Albier, Spain from June 2nd to June 11th. So I believe he will just miss the Portland Timbers match. Though, honestly, Mekhi wasn't at training on Thursday, and with the players getting healthy right now, I think it's noteworthy. Might as well mention it now that Mekhi's made 4 of his 6 short-term call-up appearances that he's allowed as a homegrown off-roster homegrown. So he's made those appearances because of depth issues, which we're getting better on. We've got guys like Rasmus Alm, we got Silva now, guys coming back, and with a formation change, I think Joyner will probably see a lot more time with City 2, but June 2nd through the 11th, he'll be in Spain with the U19s. And it is the 3rd call-up of Joyner's national team career with the U.S. So a couple of really fun things on the national team level, spotlighting Tyson Pierce and Mekhi Joyner. Congrats to both of them.
Well, here's a good tweener because I see what's coming up next. I think we should hit that Abo question, and it'll lead us right into the press conference, and we can talk more about that.
Yeah, real quick, to jump ahead of you guys on that youth comment. Owen Jorgensen and Blake Wilson played today for the U.S. Or they say the boys national team, U15s.
15s.
Yeah, 15s.
Oh,
they played
yeah.
9 a.m.
Cool.
this morning. I wasn't able to see what the result was on that, but they played Argentina's U15s 9 a.m. this morning. So I'm sure St. Louis Soccer Tractor and Brian Simpson out there, David Simpson, they know what that result was. But so we have more youth national team news today, and
Well done.
Caden Glover and Lorenzo Cornelius are 2 names that we didn't see called up that might be called up on U20 and U17 rosters.
Crossing our fingers on those because, both up Cornelius, who's just made City 2 this year, and Caden Glover, we know all about Caden Glover.
Well, yeah. Do you want to bring up that Abo question? We can start with that one and lead into whatever.
Abo in the chat asks, how do you interpret Lutz's youth comment? Do you extrapolate that out as we need to sell kids to generate funds for transfer fees? Do we see them adjusting budgets based on what has transpired? Honestly, I viewed his quote more the opposite. I felt he was saying we need to bring in younger players. We have an aging roster of sorts with some of these expiring contracts. Chris Durkin's a player that worries me because his U22 contract is up after this year, I believe. And so we've got a lot of other players that are in their upper 20s that are starting to get into the 30-year-old range. And with contracts expiring, picking up options of some of those expensive players, maybe they've been underperforming in various ways. I think he's talking about focusing more on bringing in youngsters in the transfer window. Who knows what this transfer window could look like, because we do basically have a full roster. There are very few roster slots open right now. In fact, we're full up on the senior roster. And so if we want to make any notable changes to our team, we do have to sell players. Now, the youth, I viewed that comment in that light, but it is just as likely that we're going to be transferring some players out or sending some players on loan. And if we can get the most money for a player like Caden Glover, like if somebody in Germany wants Caden Glover for $1 million, $2 million, I mean, you might be willing to part with the player like that. You have to evaluate what you have in the pipeline, who you plan on replacing him with, because we're still on the fairly light side of overall homegrown signed. We have 4 signed: Caden Glover, Mekhi Joyner, Miguel Perez, and Tyson Pierce. Right? I'm not missing anybody. I think I'm good. With those players, we're some teams in MLS have double digits of homegrown signed. Philadelphia, Nashville, I think there's some teams that are rocking the volume of homegrown players they have signed and really utilizing these off-roster homegrowns, these extra slots that they get for them. So it's not like we have a good amount, a healthy amount compared to a lot of other teams. But at the same time, I do think that you're starting to really understand the need to churn over players like this and begin to sell more consistently over the course of these transfer windows, because that's how you reinvest. That's how you get money to spend on some of the higher value players. You have to bring in money in order to spend money in a lot of ways. And I've long posited that the goal of this club is to be that self-sufficient type thing where there might be an infusion of money if you need Carolyn to step in and the Taylors to buy a really high value player just with cash or an expensive transfer fee. But by and large, I'm fully expecting the goal of a lot of these regular year-to-year, window-to-window movements to be sustaining themselves upon outgoing transfers. And so we're going to see an active transfer window. I'm convinced of it this summer, not just in trying to bring players in, but by sheer virtue of that, we have to send some players out.
Yeah, I think so. And I think that was my biggest complaint about Olof, even more, honestly, even more than the dysfunction of the team. It was like, we needed to get some of these players going.
Yeah.
And I kind of thought it was normal, but I don't know, Stu, you kind of put in some numbers of former St. Louis players that if we had held on to, they've put in a lot of MLS minutes. I don't know if you want to go into that, because that's like a bit of a bombshell thing you've got some data on that we could really drop and make an impact on the city. But, you know, we're behind. We're very, very, very behind on playing homegrowns right now.
Yeah, we kind of talked offline a little bit about just kicking around numbers, compared ourselves to kind of the golden standard of development in MLS right now, which is Philadelphia Union's academy system. Now, they have 13 homegrowns that they have signed to their roster, I believe, which is obviously a very large amount. It's the most in the league, I believe. And they have a cumulative 42 matches played this season between those homegrowns. A lot of those are Quinn Sullivan, and they have two others that have started a lot. Andrew Rick, I believe, is one goalkeeper. So it's pretty top heavy among 3 or 4 guys, but St. Louis has 0 starts. So MLS league starts. And to go from kind of where we were as a soccer academy system at the end of the St. Louis FC era, and this had a bit of a heated debate on, you know, what was the cause of kind of why we haven't seen a lot of these guys show up yet with the academy now in year 5. But some of those guys who are at the tail end of kind of that USL era STLFC academy system are guys like Kip Keller, Jensen Miller, Daniel Mooney, who we talked about, Patrick Schulte, or a guy like Chase Neese, he retired, but he got drafted. And some guys like Jack Wagoner, who really bridged the gap between the STLFC Academy era and the City Academy era, and he's now at Indiana. I don't know. I don't know enough about academy development to say if this is just kind of that was a golden generation, and, you know, producing, you know, 8-7 MLS guys within 4 years is not normal, including, you know, guys like Jack Marr and Tom Barlow, even, who was right before that. Now, there are a lot of people out there who kind of make Tom Barlow a meme, but he's still an MLS player. So, no, it's I don't know if it's something that needs to be dug into deeper, but it is. Personally, I'm slightly disappointed that we haven't seen more of an impact from the academy. No, year 5. They started in 2021, and that lead in, if you read some of the press releases when they announced the first academy, it talks about, or first academy teams, it talks about how, you know, they're hoping some of these guys would be on the first team roster in 2023. And we haven't seen enough of an impact from the academy yet, but that doesn't mean that we won't soon. And some of the guys might be late bloomers, like Volmer Fritz Vollmer, who's at
Yeah.
Northwestern right now, and he's USL2 this year with Peoria City. He might blossom, and we could still sign him to a contract when he graduates from college. So
Jackson Delkis at SLU could
Jackson
absolutely
Delkis,
turn
Oh,
into-
yeah.
there's a lot of possibilities out there. So I'm not writing off the guys who've gone through the system already, but I think we have the ability in St. Louis to see some major impacts from the academy to the first team.
What do you think, Matt?
Yeah, I think that landscape is interesting to follow because you get kids from the academy who make it to City 2, and then you have others go to college, and you kind of lose visibility on them. So we haven't really seen any kind of wraparound yet in the history of City because we're so young in players who have gone off to college and then found their way back, for instance, to like a City 2 or a City, or, you know, in those kinds of cases, there are MLS rules for if a player is in your academy and then goes off to college, you can like protect. There's like a protected list that exists of players who aren't signed to homegrown contracts where MLS teams they don't have access to them. It's almost like a homegrown. What's the thing that used to exist? The homegrown priority list or something like that, where you protect players. Homegrown territory. That's what it was.
Territories. Yeah.
The territories that kind of went away, but you still can protect certain amount of players in your region, even if they don't go to your academy or they go to your academy and then they go off to college. So I look for that to be a mechanism that we leverage in the future of trying to bring some of these players back. And I think that's a balancing act that we're going to have to figure out, is making sure we keep tabs on those kinds of players to see what quality is developing compared to just what we're developing in our own academy.
Yeah, and there are some like 18-year-olds playing right now. Kevin Sullivan doesn't count, right? And he's just an outlier in my opinion. But you know, there's 18-year-olds playing. They're mostly like depth pieces, almost all of them. A few are like absolutely incredible and are better than that. But I would say a lot of the big players that are like pretty good that could move on to something better in the near future, like regular starters for teams, are like 20, 22 years old. And even the ones that were pretty good at 18 and 20 didn't really come into being like full-on starters, even for like Seattle, Dallas, Philly. A lot of them are ended up being like 22, 23, 24 when they become like regular players. So, you know, even when you look at, you know, I hold out hope from Miguel Perez still. Joyner, I feel like, is absolutely on track to be something special around the year, the age 20, 21.
Yeah.
Not sure what his plans are for college, but you know, you covered that in depth, Matt. So
right.
It's not too late for us to be not a failure for sure. It's definitely not too late. So I'm not losing hope, but I would say we're definitely behind the 8 ball.
I would tend to agree with that, and I think we just that's where part of where Lutz's youth comment comes from, is need to prioritize that more, and that's going to be a little bit.
I'm glad he mentioned it so much, because it felt like that was like something important to him, and that's what I was hoping to hear.
And I think it's going to be a reshaping of the roster a little bit as we go through the next couple of years and kind of move on from some of these bigger contracts. I mean, as your Joachim Nilssons or Rasmus Alms, those kinds of players, some of the perennially injured ones, you know, who knows how long they're going to be with us, options that get picked up, and those could be opportunities for some of the younger players.
I even think about Carnell, how Carnell, you know, there was a bad injury streak for sure. And so we were just playing Johnny Klein every single game. Reed got a lot of minutes, and it'd be nice if we had, you know, when we needed depth pieces, we would look straight to the homegrowns and plug them right in, and there wouldn't be such a gap in talent there. And I think over the years that gap will shrink. Well, hopefully.
The ideal place that I want to see our homegrowns used and raise the talent level is so that the level that I mentioned earlier of raising the floor. Because I know there's a lot of conversation, even in our chat, about signing these better players, higher level players, consistently increase the ceiling and the higher quality of your team. But I'll circle it back to something I mentioned at the very beginning of the show, is that a bigger problem that we had for Olof, I think, is that when those guys were injured and he didn't have access to them, the replacements were not at the level that we need them to be. So an easy way to get that problem solved is to have your academy players, to have your City 2s, your homegrown players fill in that gap. Ideally, I would say that would have been a great opportunity instead of running out Hebert, Yarrow, Baumgartel, and Watts, all 4 of them. Like, I don't have a problem with Baumgartel. Don't get me wrong. I don't mean to lump him into this. It's just that's what the 4 of the back 5 were for so long, where we were bleeding goals. Instead of running out Watts at right back, instead of running out Yarrow at center back every single game when we're seeing consistent mistakes, you pull in somebody from City 2 at center back, or Tyson Pierce at right back. Like, why not give some of those players a chance? And that's part of the frustration that I think I had at the time. I know some of them are like Tyson Pierce has the short-term considerations. You have to do what's best for the player in that case. You don't want to throw them into the deep end, make sure they're ready. But that's part of the organization. And I think that's John Hackworth's responsibility, really, is making sure that those players are getting the support and the development that they need to be able to fill in these gaps. So you sign more and more homegrowns. You have 10 homegrown signed, for instance, like Philadelphia Union, and those teams that have such rich academies. New York Red Bulls is another one. And you're able to use those in these situations as opposed to the level of MLS quality that exists in our supplemental roster, which that's where we need to focus on just as much as, it's not a zero-sum game. We need to focus on both of those in order to solve the issues of when the injuries happen. We're a better off team in that case. And then when the injuries aren't a problem, we have higher quality from the get-go. And the last point I'll make is, why wasn't Michael Wenzel used? Because he's an example of a player who came from City 2 to City last year to fill in the gap, got a contract signed. He's been hurt all year. They haven't been clear. We haven't had much clearance and clarity as far as specific injuries, but he has not been healthy all year.
Where would you like to go next, Matt?
Let's dig into Olof. Let's dig into Lutz and Diego. I think where I want to go right now is just let's hit on some of these bullet points that I have in our show notes. The follow-up on the Tuesday's timeline is where I want to start, because I think everybody heard the beginning of the press conference. It's not as exciting. When Lutz and Diego took responsibility, they said they'd look at the process. They asked if anything was missed. It's obvious things that Diego mentioned, necessary but obvious, reiterating how thorough the process was, noting it's not foolproof, all the data they used, the candidates they had, all of that stuff. Like, that's not the sexy thing that I want to look at right now. I want to talk, because this was one of the most interesting things that I think grabbed a lot of people's attention. And the answer is not the most flashy of answers, but it really gets to why this announcement came on Tuesday night as opposed to 9 a.m. on Tuesday morning, right after Memorial Day, where you have a full week of training possible. So this is what Diego had to say as far as the timing of the Tuesday moves.
Yeah, we communicated the decision as soon as we were ready with it. That does not mean that it always happens in the most ideal of moments or sequences. But until that point, he was acting head coach, and he had to assume the responsibilities of training the team that day and answering to media. As soon as we had the decision taken and discussed with all the right people internally, then we moved to communicate and to speak to him and then the players and the coaching staff immediately. We also thought that it was better to do that Tuesday evening than have him arrive on Wednesday morning for training and surprise him with the news then. So while of course it would have been better if it had been a day with no activity, that wasn't the way it was. And as soon as we were ready with the decision, we communicated.
So it wasn't a question so much of Tuesday morning versus Tuesday afternoon. It was, can they get this done on Tuesday versus waiting till Wednesday? So the answer for Tuesday seems they didn't have their ducks in a row as far as dotting the I's, crossing the T's, informing everybody they needed to. And so they made the call of, he's the coach. He's going to perform the coach activities until we figure out, until we can get rid of all of this. Now, it was quite the call, admittedly, because the alternative was, what's about to happen. It's not going to be a question of you're going to scare everybody or force everybody to think, oh my gosh, what's going on? Because you're right around the corner of making the move. And Diego, I think this was an instance of Diego saying something that didn't really mean the thing he meant when he said Olof was acting head coach. Olof was acting as the head coach. Olof was the head coach at that point, no matter if he was on his way out, if they were finishing paperwork or not. And so they made the decision, and this is something you can judge them on if you want. They made the decision to just be business as usual until then, as opposed to, they had already removed the assistant coach. Valley was gone by that point. And then they waited until they had all the paperwork done and informed people who need informed to remove Olof from the situation. Talk to the players, talk to everybody Tuesday night, made it happen. I don't know. What do you think that was the right call? Do you think that they should have just, or assuming, I guess we have to set the assumption, right, Phil, that this was possibly a contractual thing where if he's under contract, he has to coach type of thing versus, I mean, we're talking as if they had a choice. So it's possible that they didn't have a choice. And if he's under contract, they can't remove him without cause, or remove him unless something like contractual was going on. I suppose that's not outside the realm of possibility, but otherwise, I think it is a questionable move to not remove him quietly, have Critch run training, not do the presser afterwards. And so you kind of just like shut the media out a little bit. That could have been an approach they did, where I'm not saying don't invite media because media is there, but just say, hey guys, some things are in the work. We're not going to do a presser after this. Speculation would run absolutely wild for about 5 or 6 hours, but then you'd make the announcement and then it would all be clear. And in hindsight being what it is, you could look back and say, oh, well, it makes sense. You wanted to get Critchley full week of training. You wanted to get him off and running, even if you didn't have all those I's dotted and T's crossed. I wonder if they could have possibly done that. But I do go back to, it's probably contractual. There's probably things that they were working with the lawyers, and that's probably the realistic answer. And so it's not as much of it's definitely not a conspiracy theory on they wanted to embarrass Olof or put him out there and make him do that knowing that they were about to can him.
Even you throwing out that alternative scenario, that sounds god awful, and just sounds like something that could be a PR explosion. So
yeah,
I think this is a bit of a non-story. I think their hands were tied as far as when they finally made the decision and what they could do in that exact moment. I think they probably learned some lessons. I run a business. I went to business school, and you learn how to fire a guy in HR classes. And, I think they could probably teach an HR class on how not to fire someone, to make sure you get everything done exactly right. Maybe it was impossible. Maybe they could have worked their butts off to make it perfect. It wasn't perfect, but I think it happens. And again, I don't think this is a story. I do appreciate them talking about it and being candid. I think they were pretty candid in this presser in general. I think that was their aim. I respect the hell out of that. I'd love to see more of it, but at least in this moment, they were extremely candid, and yeah, I'm glad they at least addressed it.
100%. There's a question from Daniel Cavura on this. Are we sure they didn't come to a buyout and that's why it took till Tuesday evening, because before they announced it, talking about Jeremy Clements mentioned it was an announcement, said Olof was released. Honestly, yeah, I mean, he has a contract. I don't believe they usually just cut these contracts and folks aren't paid out. We were talking off air that MLS head coaches typically aren't paid a lot, 6 figures. Yeah, but it's definitely not in the upper echelon what Olof was making. That's not public knowledge what Olof makes, but it's hard to believe that this was a massive, massive buyout. And in fact, Bradley Carnell had the same thing. Bradley Carnell's terminology was the club announced the departure of the club's head coach, Bradley Carnell. They didn't say fired. They didn't say released. They just said announced the departure. They could have just as easily said mutually parted ways or mutually agreed to, all of that. So I think we also have to understand that part of this is, in the time it took, was probably convincing ownership to execute the buyout and say we've come as far as we can. It's worth buying him out of his contract. And so, you could look at it as a weird way of saying, if St. Louis, when St. Louis hires their next coach, we could be paying, if you think about it in a weird way, 3 different head coaches at one time, because Bradley Carnell's contract was going to be to the end of this year, I believe. Olaf's contract was at least this year plus more. So, contract buyouts for coaches happen. And that's what happens when coaches are terminated, essentially, when they're let go, released, mutually parting ways, fired. They are due a certain amount of money in those cases. There are clauses in contracts that allow them for that. So that's what I mean by the whole contractual situation. I don't think there's anything much more to say on that.
could be red tape alone. I'm glad you threw out some options. There are so many options for why that happened the way it did.
Yep.
I think we've covered it more than we needed to, honestly. So let's talk about.
It was a swirl, though. I mean, people were just freaking
got a
out
lot
about
of
it this
talk.
week.
Yeah. They were candid, and I think the thing I was dying to hear about that I think we got a decent amount of info on was Olaf's style of play versus
Ooh.
what they got in the interview versus what they saw on the field, and managing that, like trying to figure out how to fix that. I think there was some comments about inferring that he seemed to have the freedom of a head coach. That was really interesting. I'm putting about 10 quotes into one little statement, Matt, but I think you could probably get a little more detailed, at least to lead us off here.
Well, with Olaf's style of play, this is where the two interesting videos come in towards the end of the press conference that we're going to play in just a second. But to frame this, this was a question initially asked by Ben Hochman from the Post-Dispatch about Olaf weren't running the style of play and what Olof told them. Like, what were the conversations like on why Olof said he didn't play the style of play that he was brought in to do? There's some really interesting, there's some confusing terminologies used, and this is where I asked the clarifying question, and there were, I think Diego's comments made sense on a re-listen if you're listening for knowing what to listen for, but in the moment, I got messages and DMs too. It confused some people on what he actually said when he said it, because the getting from point A to point C wasn't totally clear. But framing this, Diego did say that they believe Olof played the players that he did because it was the best squad Olof thought would win him games, which was the main goal they set for him. A lot's been made about why Olof played the way he did. He ran the same group of players, played that differing style. Olaf's explanation for playing the way he did can illuminate kind of what happened and the stubbornness of Olof and his interpretation of the abilities of players. But I want to play that clip of what Diego's first answer was to Ben Hochman's question on what Olof said, why he didn't run the style of play that they hired him to do.
That the first 11 he picks, or the style he wants to play in this moment, he does it to get wins. And that was the reason why Olof decided to select the way he selected. I think that's a pretty simple one.
I would also add, like when we've had lots of conversations with him, he was always very clear around that this isn't his natural desired style of play either. The style of play that he played, his teams played before coming here. But he was also pragmatic around trying to find the best way to win games.
So that's why it was a little confusing in what he was talking about, Olaf's style of play. Quote, this isn't his natural desired style of play either. The style of play his teams played before coming here, but he was also pragmatic about the best way to win games. What I believe, what I interpreted in the moment is that Diego is somehow intimating that Olaf's desired style of play wasn't the City style of play when he came here, saying this isn't his natural desired style of play either, the style of play his teams played before coming here, saying that they knew he didn't play that in Sweden, then he came here and that wasn't his desired style of play. So I asked a clarifying question, and here was Diego's response with me interpreting it that way to my question, clarifying it. Sorry, I want to follow up on that last point. Olof was upfront about this style of play not being his preferred style. I'm confused on some of the comments that you made when you hired him in the fit to the style, aligning with what your goals were. So can you elaborate on that lack of fit?
That's exactly what I'm saying. What I'm saying is, before, when you look at his teams, he played a style of play that is very similar to the style of play that St. Louis City has. That's what I'm saying. There was consistency. You can see it in the data. You can see it in the eye test. This is, of course, what Lutz and his team look really carefully at when it comes to the philosophy and the importance of the game model. So I think we just didn't see that translate over to St. Louis City. And
So I think was a good clarification, Matt, because I did think for a second, I thought I heard it that way as well. And I think Diego clarifies it really well there, but even more so later, Lutz talks about somehow someone asked about like, what was it like in the interview? And Lutz said, we knew he could play our style.
Yes.
His teams in Sweden looked like a St. Louis City team.
Yes.
He was like, the numbers, the underlying numbers, the way they attacked, the way they defended, it was St. Louis style. So he was capable of it. He knew how to play that style. They hired him to do those things. And Diego's saying that, like, things went a different way because of the way Olof felt like he needed to win. But it was good to hear like what they thought they were getting versus what they got, right? I think we got that very clearly in this press conference, and it was probably the biggest thing I wanted out of it, was a better explanation of how do we get from that plan A to god-awful plan B.
Yeah, I think the clarification really helped because I misinterpreted, and I think a lot of people did because of the way the answer was kind of the way it came out. The clarification really answers it for me. It's when they evaluated him, when he interviewed, they saw the data showed what the eye test showed is that when he coached in Sweden, his teams in Sweden played the style of play that St. Louis wants to and does implement prior to him coming here and post him here. So when you're talking about fit and style of play, they had proven examples. That's what Diego's saying. They had proven examples of his time in Sweden. So when he talks about being able to implement this style, when he talks about knowing how to implement the style, the St. Louis City style, they saw him do that in Sweden. That's what I understand Diego saying. But when he came to St. Louis, he didn't do it. And what I would have loved to been able to ask a follow-up on is, what did Olof give as his explanation for why that didn't end up happening in St. Louis? The best we have are intimations of that. And I think it goes back to, and it's not hard to make these conclusions. I think Diego and Lutz were kind of leaving some breadcrumbs here throughout the press conference without directly saying this, because I think this would have been possibly throwing Olof under the bus a little bit had they expanded upon this. But I think they said enough and they left enough up to interpretation that we can draw conclusions to the fact that earlier in the season, Olof said over and over, the players didn't have the quality to implement the style he wanted to play. And so if you draw the direct line between those two things, Olof was specifically saying, I came in here to run the St. Louis City style as I see it running, as I did in Sweden. And I don't have the quality of players at my disposal right now to do that. My goal when I'm here at St. Louis City, per Lutz and Diego, is to win games. And that's what Lutz said at the very beginning. Diego said it as well, I think. His goal was to win games. And so Olof made the call that since he didn't believe he had the quality of players to run the St. Louis City quintessential style, the high press, the aggression, the direct to goal, playing it fast and loose like that, he didn't have that quality. So he was going to do what he felt he needed to do in order to not lose games and in order to try and win games. That's why you saw the boring play to start the season. You saw clean sheets galore, the 5 in a row. That was great. But you didn't see any semblance of an attack because he had changed things up so much, seeking the wins because he felt, and this is my interpretation, he felt that he didn't have any other option in how to play the players he had available in order to get wins other than to do what he did. Do you think that has merit, or do you have a different interpretation of that?
Oh no, I thought they made it pretty clear, don't you?
Yeah, I think that's the exact conclusion that Diego and Lutz were trying to get us to draw to. Saying about
go ahead. No, I just think Lutz threw, this is quick, Lutz threw like a little breadcrumb too, like saying, are we looking at a coach right now? He's like, well, there are no coaches that match our style available right this second. So that also implies, I think he's very clearly saying, we don't just go look for a coach that's going to play whatever he wants. Like, we want a specific type of coach, and also implying Olof was that. We're picky, right? And we thought we found a guy where we're picky about, and it just didn't happen. I thought that was another nice breadcrumb.
Absolutely. And I think you can try to go back even further and looking at the interview process, looking at Olof being their number one candidate. Some of the things ancillary to style of play helped add to the resume of the academy, playing the kids, doing more with less out there. He didn't have anywhere near as expensive of a roster as St. Louis has. And that's telling you something on what he was able to do with the quality out there, earning promotion year after year. And so that's a nice, those are nice window dressings on the overall package of the style of play. And so you didn't have that core thing. You couldn't get wins based on what Olof was saying he basically had to do with the types of players and the quality he had. And so it became untenable at that point where Olof was seemingly not going to change his style of play. But the only interesting thing, and this is entirely speculative, this next part, the only interesting thing that I saw as a conspiracy theory that it made me go, on this is we are getting some players back healthy. We are getting Henry Kessler, Thomas Totland. Hopefully Giannis Horn is around the horizon. Our attackers are there. So are we saying that even as those players were starting to become available, the conspiracy is we didn't want to really give Olof the chance to coach those players, because if he starts to win, then we can't just get rid of him. And he's shown such a stubbornness, a bullheadedness to not move, not try new things, not actually implement the style, even at the risk of losing, because that's the St. Louis City identity, and he made it his own call. I tend to think it's not that brash from a front office perspective. It's just an interesting theory that I read. But I do think that the idea of making the move now isn't just to salvage the playoffs, isn't just to say we've come as far as we can. It's also a frustration from the front office that the fans share. There hasn't been things overtly said, and nor should there be things overtly said by the front office during these periods of time. Those conversations are happening behind the scenes. And I've been saying nonstop, have to trust that the front office is actually doing their job behind the scenes. They're not acting rash. They're looking at the short and long-term vision, but they're just as frustrated as we are. All of this put together, the style of play conversation, what Lutz said, all these breadcrumbs coming out, I think it's really speaks to the fact that they were as frustrated with us as they're as frustrated as us this entire time. And so making the move now is just as much about what Critchley offers in getting back to the style and believing in that style that much. And I think that's circling it back to David Critchley. That's really where he comes into play, is you get back to the basics, the fundamentals of what this system should be in time to salvage the season, not waiting for it to drag on into June, and absolutely not waiting for the Aston Villa friendly. I mean, come on, guys. That was one of the most insulting things that I can remember reading about the front office, is that, do you think Olof is being held on until at least the Aston Villa friendly? That for two things. First of all, we're on an 11-game winless streak, 12 against first-team competition. If that extends and we're on a 17-game winless streak by the time Villa comes into town, how much better is that going to look just by having the former Villa captain as our coach? He's on a 17-game winless streak as Villa comes to town. That's going to look absolutely. It's more awkward. Yeah, he's running a team into the ground and he's welcoming his former team. That's and the concept that in order to do that, it basically puts marketing and branding and selling your club ahead of the performance on the field. That to me is the most egregious example of not trusting your front office, of assuming that they have their priorities entirely out of whack. And that one's baseless to me. I haven't seen a single thing that Lutz and Diego and Carolyn have done that would seemingly indicate that they would be prioritizing the optics of a former Villa player, former Villa captain coaching our team against Villa over actual results on the field. So I don't know why, but I took offense to that one as a City fan.
I like it. To go back just a little bit, I think another breadcrumb that was dropped, it has to do with that, is that Lutz fit in there almost out of nowhere. Like a lot of people think he couldn't handle MLS level. And I thought that was, or he couldn't handle it being such a different league. And that's a thought I've had for sure. And I'm kind of glad he fit that in there, because I guess I kind of thought that was the case, right? Like, this is just such a different league. He's not used to it. The parity, maybe maybe in Sweden, it's easier to lift a team up than it is in the United States, or, all the different things about MLS. There's a million weird things about MLS that isn't true for the rest of the entire globe in soccer. So, that's one thought I had. I'm glad he shut that down, or at least he gave his opinion on that in my, how I took it, because it still could be true. But either way, it did kind of lead me to think like that Olof said, we don't have the players to do this. And my next kind of, after a while, I kind of got this feeling like he's playing scared. You know what I mean? Like that is not like, that's not good. That's number one. No leader should kind of attack a season that way. It's almost admitting defeat before you started. Second, that's the most un-American thing I've ever heard. So as a St. Louisan, as a Midwesterner, as a man that has a chip on his shoulder for being flyover footy, right? For, you know, the coast not giving us the credit that, I feel like we should be due, which I guess that's hurting right now, actually. So maybe I shouldn't say that right now, but still, if you don't think you're good enough, you put your big boy pants on and you go attack them anyway. You know what I mean? And so that's something like, that's part of this refreshing feeling with Critchley is he's like, well, we're going to get after him. We're going to play it exciting. We're going to be athletic. We're going to blah, blah, blah. That's like so good to get that vibe back. And I think he can even take it further, because I think as St. Louisans, like, that's how we want to be. We want to be bullish. We want to go after you. Yeah. And if we lose, we're going to go down fighting hard. So I'm excited to get that vibe back into the club.
Yeah, I like how you put that. It was playing scared, and it wasn't playing to win, even though you could say from Lutz and Diego saying his goal was to play to win, and he did what he thought he needed to do to play to win. I would say he was playing not to lose. And if they squeaked out a win, that was better than trying for a win and epically failing like he thought that quality of players would do. And it's not a surprise that I'm not saying he lost the locker room, because that term carries a lot of heavy implications with it. But it's not surprising to me if players wouldn't want to give it their all, or had bad demeanors on the field, or they were shrugging their shoulders or looking down or defeated. Because
what is this system going to do to my career? My God, these men have families.
All of that. Yeah. I mean, legitimately talking about what we were mentioning earlier with the options and the players fighting for their careers. Yeah. I think that's a thing that David Critchley has going for him now. And maybe in general, and I don't know intricacies of other clubs when they go through managers. I'm not as plugged in, obviously. But when you talk about a new coach bounce, this is kind of what I think of, where the players had not necessarily given up, but maybe they're down, they're defeated. They're not wanting to play for the manager. The manager can't get the most out of these players. And so the new one comes in, and if you pick the right interim, you pick the right caretaker, at least, then he's capable of getting more out of him. And I think that's what we look for from Critch.
Absolutely.
But we look for it from Critch. We don't look for it from John Hackworth, which is my beautiful segue into possibly one of our last two topics. I know we're running long on time, but I want to hit these last two really quick. John Hackworth. I posited something the day before the press conference because, reading breadcrumbs, trying to figure things out. And I think I was pretty spot on. Lutz said at the press conference, asked multiple times on why John Hackworth was not selected and really isn't a candidate for the head coaching position. He didn't say he's not a candidate, but he didn't say he was. He basically spoiled it down to Hack is the technical director. It's a bigger picture with John Hackworth. The strategic alignment with all the groups, talking about the academies, City 2, City, all the groups in our organization. Lutz said, quote, he's my right-hand man. And he said it was clear that David Critchley deserves the chance, with especially looking at the play styles. Critchley's been there since day one. We talked about his resume on our Olof firing special, but that Critchley deserves the chance and that Lutz knows what to expect from him. He said, I talked to David Critchley twice a week in his old role. So we talk regularly. So there's a relationship that's there built. And then Ben Hockman followed up with, does that mean that he's not a candidate going forward? Speaking about John Hackworth. And Lutz said he's our technical director, and we haven't spoken of that. So I think that's what this is. It's not, we saw some success John Hackworth had last year and we're bypassing it. It's the fact that we value Hackworth more in this organization as the technical director, and we believe we can find a head coach that can do exactly what Hack had been doing last season and better, while still having the value Hack provides at the technical director level. Because Hackworth last season was averaging around 1.3-ish points per game under his tenure, which is enough to get in the playoffs. But and Taylor Twellman said, I like this with what he said this week about everything else, is just getting into the playoffs really the organization's goal? Because that's a pretty low bar to set for yourself. In a league that allows 9 out of 15 teams make the playoffs, and your goal is to make the playoffs. I get that we've had a couple rough years now, rough year and a half. We have got to start thinking a little bit higher than that at some point. And maybe that's part of this. Maybe behind the scenes, they are thinking bigger than that, saying Hack had 1.3. He would have gotten into the playoffs if you stretch that out. Yeah, but we think we can find a better head coach. And Hack is irreplaceable almost as the technical director, because when you talk about the American influence, which about wanting more of an American influence, that's what Hackworth brings: the connections, the relationships, the scouting, the trust. That's Hackworth. And so all of these players that we had, from Jared Stroud, Chris Durkin, Indiana Vasilev, all these players Tim Parker, that came up from various levels of MLS academies, from youth national teams. Hackworth had so much experience in scouting, in coaching all these players in his previous roles. That's what you need in the front office. That's all Lutz is saying here. Has nothing to do with saying Hack is a bad head coach. It's just looking at what benefits the organization better. It's Hackworth in the front office.
Yeah, and I think that ties it back to me too. I apologize if I've said some of this before, but look, all eyes on the front office. This team has looked more and more European every year, right?
Fair.
And I'm like, I was starting to worry. I was like, are they even listening to Hackworth at all? Like, what are we doing here? We're leaning really hard into this. I wasn't even saying it was a bad thing. I'm still not really, but to be fair, like, I think a lot of people's least favorite players are probably more Hackworth kind of guys. But I think Hackworth has great connections. I think he represents that American side of us that I think is really important to me. And I think it has value in MLS. So yeah, I'm with you, Matt. Just to make it shorter, I value him too. And I'm really happy. Even when he was the last interim coach and people were like, should we give him the coaching job next year? I said, I don't care whether he stays as the coach or full coach or not. I don't care. They can decide if they think that's best. What I really care about is making sure he stays in the organization one way or another. And I don't want to sour that by him being a coach and getting fired and never coming back. You know what I mean?
Bingo.
So I still feel that way. So that's where I'll leave it.
Bingo. And a lot of the questions today centered around, or on Thursday's press conference, centered around Hackworth as the temporary, the caretaker, the interim coach right now. Was he considered? Why not? Etc. Last year could have provided that answer. Aaron in the chat, how many organizations have their technical director coaching the second team? Part of this, I think, deals with what Lutz learned last year. It would shock me if Hackworth was able to devote anywhere near the amount of time that he could or should be devoting to help this organization in the front office while he was the first team interim manager. The amount of time, and this is, I don't know the exact details on this, but it's easy to read the intention from Lutz, what Lutz said. The amount of time necessary to be the first team manager versus the second team manager, significantly more. You have more responsibilities, you have more pressure, you have more intensity. And that's part of what this is Hack filling in for City 2 still allows him, and this is basically what Lutz said, still allows him to do his full technical director job, as opposed to needing to dive all in on the first team and the pressure and responsibilities that come with that. And yes, that does mean for this summer window, Jeremy Clements is spot on as well. Part of that is needing Hack for this summer window and needing it for the winter window and needing it for what comes ahead. Because this is the timing piece. If we don't know if Critchley is going to be the caretaker manager for a few months, for the rest of the season, Diego specifically did not put a timeline on when they want to have a head coach hired. He didn't say they want to have a head coach hired before the summer window. He didn't say they want to have a head coach hired before the end of the season. He specifically left that vague and open. So there exists a possibility, however likely or unlikely, that Critchley is our caretaker manager for the rest of the season. They also said they kind of hope that Critchley is able to go back to City 2, because that's probably his career path right now, is going back to City 2 once they find a permanent full-time head coach. And that's fine for Critchley. I think it goes back to a lot of the experience he's had and what his trajectory in the organization's been. He's only been a professional head coach at the next pro level since November. I said that. So I think Hackworth's time that he would have been an interim manager this year, being unknown, taking so much time away from technical director, affecting the windows of this season, summer and winter, huge factor in this as well.
And I massively support that as well, for sure. I don't want you to put too much weight into this, but I do think it should just be mentioned that, I was talking to Brendan Weezy on his show the other day, and he was like, would you be interested in Critchley staying on? And I was like, well, let's think about what I think is the best MLS manager right now, and maybe even in history, is Wilfried Nancy. he's amazing, right? And he was the academy coach at Montreal Impact, and then he was an assistant for several years. And then he took over for Montreal, and then we saw what he's been doing in Columbus, and surely he's off to something bigger and better after this. So, you know, it could happen, right? Critchley could show his quality. And even if he doesn't, you know, get the full coaching job, the opportunity is here, and he could move on to bigger, better things after this even. So it's all, you know, I think he sounds great so far. He's done amazing with City too, like super good. So.
I like how you said he sounds great. Dialing it back to that English accent again.
That's you.
That is me.
I'm not a big English accent guy.
Maybe it's just the content that I take in, even on Bundesliga matches, even on heck, when we get a English USL announcer, I dig those, Sirius XM, all those things. The last topic that I had, Phil, is talking about what they're looking for in a new head coach. So I think it's important as they have this coaching search. Diego said kind of like right at the beginning, talking about the process, looking at what they missed, evaluating the issues that occurred from the last coaching search, noting it was thorough and everything. But Diego also said a lot of the things they looked at then last season are not too dissimilar now. They're not rushing, noted the interim managers, the caretaker managers. So this is where he said it's not unreasonable to think that if they find a person in the season that Critchley goes back, but otherwise he stays through the season. No timeline. But what are the qualities they're looking for? And a lot of the questions really centered around MLS experience. Going back to your point that you made a little bit ago about Olof not having that, and was the league too much for him type of thing. And Lutz said specifically, coaches out there with MLS experience is an easy list to provide. And we've seen that list. Fans have provided us that list this season. I'm sure we're going to get it in the chat. Guys like Jim Curtin, Giovanni Savarese. I think Matias Almeida is out there.
Ramos is out there.
Ramos is out there. There's a few, but if there's one permeating thought that I took away from what Lutz was saying, it's that if we only look at MLS experience, but not our style of play and philosophy, it's a big mistake as well. Yeah. And that lays out the priority as well. It's not MLS experience. It's not, and he says, we're completely open. He mentions all nationalities. He mentions MLS experience or not. It needs to fit our philosophy. That's the most important thing, that they fit our playing style. And he said, if that happens to come with MLS experience, then great. But guys, he did not really give a whole lot of reassurance or even a teaser that any of the existing open candidates that have MLS experience match our playing style. So I really, my God, we just got a Peter Vermees drop in the chat. Come on, Bayern Tim. There is nothing that leads me to believe that any MLS out of work head coach is on the top of the list. From my understanding, there weren't any of them that were on the top of the list last time, and most of them are still the same out of work head coaches, save for Peter Vermees. But no, that I can't see that at the very least. And I'm just going to move on by saying Diego also added, we also haven't come to the conclusion that the fact that Olof didn't have MLS experience was a big driver in where we are. This was an interesting comment that Diego added to me, Phil, because it gave me two kind of thoughts. One is he's adding on to, you don't need that MLS experience. And we're not convinced that Olof not having the MLS experience is what his downfall was. But the other was kind of indicating that the overall evaluation of what went wrong, the deep dive, the root cause analysis for the business majors out there, the root cause analysis of what went wrong with Olof's hiring, the evaluation process, and their interactions with him maybe as a head coach, those are all still ongoing. So while they're searching for a head coach, they're still learning what it was that they need to do better with from the last process. And I think that's understandable because of the short time frame we're talking about here. It's only May. You know, Olof has only been coaching this team for 3 months, started in late February, March, April, May, 3 months. That's not a lot of time to be doing evaluations and deep dives into what went wrong with this last process so we can spin up a new process that doesn't have these mistakes. So they're still kind of figuring this out. And the best thing that we could hope for as City fans is that David Critchley succeeds. Because I think the more that Critchley succeeds, the less pressure they're going to feel to sign an immediate head coach. to get this all taken care of. That's my opinion. You might have a different thought, and I'm very curious in how you think about that, because I do think that while some folks are talking, oh, if Critchley does really well, might he be considered for the permanent head coach? And I'm thinking more, if Critchley does well, it buys them time to conduct a more thorough search and not feel pressured to find somebody ASAP.
Dude, I'm kind of I don't have an opinion on that. Like,
Okay.
I think they just need, they're going to have to pick a coach, and like, God help them, it better be good. Because if it's bad, like, we'll just, we'll learn a lot. Right. And we'll just start from scratch, all the way from scratch. Right. So I hope they find someone, and I hope that person stays for a while or moves on to something better. That's my hope. But man, if they get it wrong, like, we're just starting completely over. We're going to be talking about a whole lot of more problems and things to get our ducks in a row for.
Well, on the new coach search, one of the other underlying factors here is Lutz Pfannenstiel's contract goes until the end of the 2026 season. Now, there's a big debate, and I've talked about this a few times with a few folks, that this could be Lutz's last chance to find a head coach. I think a lot of people had said Lutz should be on the hot seat now, and he should have gone with Olof. The question I didn't get a chance to ask, and I really wanted to, but there wasn't a good place for it, honestly, in the flow of everything, was more of like trying to understand. And I would love to sit down with Diego to understand this a little bit more, and this angle of it, as much as he could say it, but understanding his day-to-day more or less, his responsibilities in conjunction with others at City. Is he just the top guy who Lutz reports to him, Lutz tells him what he's found, and then Diego more or less agrees or doesn't agree, signs off, doesn't sign off? We kind of got a little bit of an intimation on that when Diego made a comment about Lutz and his staff. This was in the answer to me from that clip that I played, so you can rewind it a little bit to find that, or check the presser. He mentioned Lutz and his staff's evaluation of Olof, finding out all the things about how he coached in Sweden, those kinds of things. So it really, that to me is the absolute closest that I have to understanding the dynamics between Lutz and Diego, where Lutz is he's the man, obviously, in the sporting department. He has a staff, he has scouts, he has people who report to him, and it's Lutz's call on who they scout, when they scout, where they scout. But then all of it comes back to Lutz talking to Diego, almost providing him the one pager of here's what everybody found, and here's what I think, here's my recommendations, here's my justifications for the recommendations. And then Lutz and Diego have that conversation. That's kind of how I see the dynamics playing out. But the reason that I bring that up now, and that way I think that's important to consider, is now you're on your third coaching hire. You mentioned this is the fourth coach right now with Critchley, but they've only hired two before. They're about to hire a third. Carnell, I think Lutz hid a little bit under Carnell's tenure overall. Bradley Carnell was employed by St. Louis City for 2.5 years because he was hired actually in the winter of 2022 before City 2 even kicked off. And so he was an employee at then. So he fit that criteria of over the average length of an MLS head coach. Olof is well under that. This is an epic failure under all fronts. And so now I do think if this next head coach fails, by the time Lutz's contract has not expired yet, and he's still under contract, I do think that there is a potential for that. And so that goes back to what all Lutz's fingerprints are on, which is everything about this organization. Lutz was hired before Diego. Lutz helped design the training facility, the stadium, locker room, all that stuff. He built this roster from the ground up. It has all of his hallmarks. So if you move on from Lutz at some point, without his contract expiring and without that full succession planning, you're going to be a little bit behind the 8 ball in having to craft a new roster as you find a sporting director that either you find a sporting director to take over for him who carries on from what he's been doing and has the exact same organizational philosophy, or you find a sporting director who you trust to build a different type of roster, and in which case you're looking at a multi-transfer window roster rebuild. Either of those are really bad scenarios. So at the end of the day, all you can hope for is that Lutz is able to see out his contract, and whoever they find as the head coach, take whatever time you need, because this could be your last one.
Yeah, and I even focus. I keep saying this, but every time you give me this opening, I'm gonna say it, Matt. That even players, you look at, I think of Garth Lagerwey going down to Atlanta, and it seems to be, I know it's really bad down there right now, but I think he's going to get that roster under control.
Yeah.
I could see a new sporting director coming in and for Lutz rather, and fixing the roster. But I put so much value in the futures program and making soccer accessible for all of the city, making sure the academy is productive and valued, and pushing players through. Like, again, I'm glad Lutz mentioned that in the presser several times. So I just want to make sure if we do lose Lutz that that is under control, either in-house or we bring in someone who is even better, or at least the same level of putting those things as a high priority in the club and in the city. So that's just something that's really valuable to me, and I would worry about if Lutz left. But I think a lot of that is actually run outside of Lutz's office now. So I think maybe, hopefully, he's kind of planted the seed, and all the operations guys are handling it from there, and it doesn't lose any steam. I just wanted to make sure, I'm going to keep repeating how important that is to me personally.
So I could see the team moving away from the high pressing philosophy at some point in the future, but I could never see the team moving away from the desire to continue growing and developing players at a rapid pace from around the St. Louis area. There have been so many discussions, and that's part of the whole "it's more than soccer" thing to me, is giving kids a chance, identifying players, bringing them into the academy, and then taking as many kids as possible and growing them through the structure, through the system, and developing them into meaningful professional players. It's a similar story to what you hear in regular college, right? Like you might go into college to play sports, but how many college athletes go on to play professional? It's similar in the academy, where you're bringing all these kids in, you're giving them these opportunities, the structure, the experience, and then you just identify those few that pop up. And I don't ever expect that pipeline to quit. Because I think that's an ownership focus. I think that plays into the supporting local, the growing the community dynamics that the Taylor family has, and they value the academy and the youth structure as a part of that. And so no matter what the system, what the style, who the sporting director, who the GM president is, I think all of that can change, that can mold, that'll develop and evolve throughout the years and years the city will exist. You're always going to have this academy, homegrown, play the kids kind of mindset, because it supports more than just on the field winning.
Yep. And it's important to have grassroots soccer and develop next generation of coaches, not just make it affordable for everyone to play. But one of America's biggest problems is having coaches that know how to tell kids how to develop into smart soccer players, not athletic ones, not ones that just kick the ball, run and score because they're the biggest or fastest or whatever. We have to teach these kids how to play, and we have to teach them right. And there's a whole method to that is totally opposite of the way that most are being grown right now. Yeah. And St. Louis City, when you look at, I've been a YMCA coach, when you look at the information they give YMCA coaches, whether they use it or not is one thing, whether they understand it is another thing. It doesn't matter. They are trying to get kids to do it the right way. I won't go into the details, but right now they have such a good outlook on how soccer should be growing in this country. And, the more of that, the better for our club and the better for USMNT, which is also important to me. So, again, I value the heck out of that, and I think they're on the right track. I just want to keep it going.
Absolutely agree. And it's why we touch on the academy from time to time when we can. It's why we touch on those next competitions. City 2 is a focus constantly on guys like Lorenzo Cornelius, Emiliano Chavez, those kinds of players who they begin to break through and be notable because they're picked up on the youth national team levels. They're making debuts for City 2. These are noteworthy things that really play into more than just, it's a cool story. But like Aaron Leake said in chat, growing young homegrown players is good business instead of having to constantly overpay to bring in free agents. This is the pipeline. I mentioned it earlier. This is how you raise that floor in quality of players that you can rely on in times of need, as opposed to guys that you signed to City 2 contracts years ago, and then they're just still there because they're stalwarts, more or less. I think that's where we need to go as an organization, is prioritizing signing more of those players quickly and giving opportunities to the players who earn them, and really being smart being smart about giving those opportunities to the players that earn them, not just attackers, but look at other positions, look at who's breaking through. And part of that is the coaching staff in those other organizations like City 2, the Academy, putting players at their best positions to get the most out of them. So is Tyson Pierce a midfielder? Is Tyson Pierce a right back? Playing him at those better positions, giving him more experience at more positions. I think that's where John Hackworth comes in too, and value as his technical director of working with all of the organizations and working with the coaches and the staff at each one of those levels. And we're going to get better at this. We're going to continue to grow and get better at this as we find better coaches. Do we want to talk about one of the more recent coaching hires for St. Louis City that we've heard about, or City's continuing to find some of these coaches to bring in that they have proven pedigrees to develop kids, and they're continuing to do better, right? We're in the third season, like the fifth season, if you count the Academy, and it's continuing to get better. We're going to continue to sign more homegrowns. That goes back to part of the play to the youth signings we talked about earlier, in the roster turnover that's going to happen possibly at the end of this season or next season. I think we're going to be at an inflection point, honestly, in how this roster looks and where we start to see some of this turnover, some of this more local flair that starts to break through in players growing up and new homegrowns being signed.
Agree. Thank you, Matt. We've hit over an hour now, which is not at all surprising based on the situation. And plus, Matt and I have mics, so this just tends to happen in general. So
it's a good it's a good thing to think about, a good signal for the David Critchley era in my eyes. We're being positive. We're looking forward here. I think we've done enough looking back. We're going to continue to bring up Olof Mellberg a little bit here and there. Obviously, he's a part of St. Louis's history, and we're going to have to compare things that we do to what happened during his tenure. But I am very much looking forward to turning the page. I'm very much looking to be at Energizer Park on Saturday. Hopefully, it's a beautiful day in the afternoon. It should be warm, I think. And if you're looking for some positivity for this team, if you're looking for a shining light, this is the game. Like this is the possible game that could start to turn it all around. And Critchley, God love him, he said all the right things in the press conference. You are absolutely ready to get behind this man and just go to war, and let's do it for the rest of the season.
And, I think we said a lot of things at Mellberg's expense today. But I think it's good to end. We look at what Carnell has moved on to, and he's doing very well there so far.
Which Lutz loves.
The best.
Lutz is happy. Lutz and Carnell are still friends. They're happy. He's happy. He's succeeding.
And maybe learned a lot from being here and is
Probably
becoming a better person for it. I guarantee you that is the case to some degree, any degree. And again, we say to Olof, thank you for your service, sir. Yes. We wish you the best as well. I hope you learned some lessons and are massively successful from here on out as well. Wishing you the best. So, yes, just signing off with that, and massively more so even. Can't wait to see the Critchley era, like you said, Matt.
One other thing is, if you are going to be at that game this weekend and Edu Leuven is in the starting 11, give him the biggest absolute possible roar you possibly can when his name is announced. He deserves nothing less after everything he's been through to be able to return to Energizer Park in the starting 11 if he's able to for St. Louis City proper. I expect the roof to be blown off of this place when Edu Leuven's name is announced. And that their players aren't just going to rally around Critch. They're going to rally around Leuven and feed the team with that noise because they need it.
Yep, that's it from us. Thank you so much for listening. We appreciate your input. We very much appreciate you coming back to us week after week and making it this far if you are here. We'll talk to you guys soon and hope to see you at the game. Bye.
Go City.
Okay, we're out.